to be fair. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here with Sean, Dice with Rice. I'm trying to look for what the hell is in my background that's giving me a little white thing there. And I am Mr. Brad Chester, wearing my I Serve Time in Azkaban shirt. And I am super excited about talking about robots. The Necrons specifically. Deal with it, Necrons. Also, this is a Sean Rice specific request, so we're doing this.
Yeah, this is something that's been asked for a lot over at my channel on Dice with Rice, and I finally wanted to put it out. I wanted to do a deal with it first before I do one of my little faction videos, so I am glad that we are talking about it today.
I'm ready to rock and or roll. Let's talk about how you deal with it. Preparation. Identifying strengths and weaknesses, making the plan, the thing that really gets down and dirty, practice. And practice and making adjustments are effectively go together. Synergy, the gestalt, setting, all of the things together. Yes, playmakers, Dice with Rice.
That's me, baby. Thank you. Appreciate you.
We definitely need Michael Buffer to do that for us. He's pretty cheap. We should probably be able to make that happen.
Played as the intro every time. That'd be awesome.
I mean, it's probably really super cheap. I do love this quote from the Necrons, by the way, that we're using today. I've seen the gods themselves bent and broken at the whims of the Empire. What hope do you have to resist? Also, the Necrons really put the dwarves to the shame with the amount of grudge they carried. They're like, we're super mad about this war not going our way. How about making our entire civilization soulless to win? On it. So,
yeah, pretty deep. Necrons have great lore. Go check it out. There are so many amazing channels. Everything about Necrons is pretty awesome. How they play, their lore, the models are simple to paint. If you're someone like me who doesn't appreciate 6 million little details. All around A+.
Also, War in Heavens.
Yeah.
Hello. Let's talk about preparation first. Ooh, how to enslave some star gods. Hit me with some combos, brother.
Yeah, so obviously the Necrons are a very powerful faction with a lot of good synergy. They were definitely a front runner going into the data slate for, are they going to get touched? Are they not going to get touched? If they don't get touched, are they too good? That's something we were definitely looking at. So why? Why are Necrons so good? And I think this first one here is the reason why. You combine their stratagem to whenever they, in a unit is finished making attacks against them, the unit in question immediately reanimates. You go, okay, sure. D3 wounds, whatever. Maybe D3 plus some more if warriors are on objective. Sure. Combine that with a res orb. Now you're doing it on your opponent's command phase. And then combine that with a reanimator. Now you add in an additional D3 every time you reanimate. So you can reanimate the same unit up to 3 times before it gets back to you. That is an absurd amount of guys that are coming back every single time. And the big thing to remember with your reanimation here is it's on everybody. Like, you can just start reanimating Locust Destroyers that have been destroyed. You can, multi-wound models. And especially if you just don't have volume of attacks, this combo right here, if you just put it in any Necron army, is just going to be a real pain for those armies that don't necessarily deal out a lot of damage. Nightmare scenario for Sisters. I don't see a Sisters army successfully killing everything.
Especially with that. I want to go to the wall real quick because, one, we have one of the best lines I've seen in a while. They didn't mean to be soulless, guys. They got duped by a guy whose name is literally the Deceiver. What? But the reanimation roll itself, 1+ saves goes. He feels it's kind of awkward having an army rule that only gives agency to your opponent, since it can only be processed by damage and attacks. You can mitigate that quite a bit, though. You get to choose how things happen after that. Yes, they do have the impetus on, your opponent has the impetus to have agency when it happens, but you can process this when you want to. And it's a big deal now that they changed it a bit by only letting the strats be doubled up for 0 on that. So you really have to choose. It is up to you to start choosing when and where you're going to be doing that. Because you can get extra movement, you can shenanigans things, you can put up your defensive strats on that. So I don't mind it at all, because it kind of gives back and forth on that, because your opponent thinks you might do this, but you think he might do this. So it's a game of chicken, really, of your reanimation sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is a lot of, as we'll get to, a lot of playing Necrons is a low skill floor, like a particularly high skill floor, but an even higher skill ceiling. You know, you can just say, "Oh, you didn't kill me," and put your guys back. Sure, anybody can do that. It's how you do it in a way that matters, how that actually impacts the game. Because, you know, if you just stand still and, you know, take the beating the whole game against a good player, you're not going to win. There is more to it than that.
I'm a big, one of the big things on that, Sean, is you can do things, especially when you're talking about like GW train and stuff, where you have the breaks in the buildings. You can literally lead out guys onto an objective, let your opponent waste an activation, because he has to wipe the entire squad in one activation because you're behind that terrain afterwards. So you can effectively make your opponent waste an activation. They didn't kill enough. You res that, and a lot of times you can res back right where you were. So that's a big thing on that. So it's really important to, a lot of times with Necrons, you're baiting out your opponent to waste activations, because you only have 2 or 3 models out in the open. And then you pull those, and then you're just going to regen them back anyways. But it gets you to make your opponent's phases not optimal. And when you take away that optimum efficiency with target priority and target what they're shooting at, it's a big deal. So you can really start wasting over the course of the game those turns where your opponent should have picked up multiple things, and then they end up picking only up one thing. They pick up a destroyer or whatever. Right.
That's a big part of it. Is, you know, everyone talks about the stratagem that Necrons could use for free, and now we can't use it for free, but you can still use it. And most importantly, you have the threat of using it, because as Brad said, if you just have one guy standing on the objective, are you not going to shoot it? Okay, if you put too much into it that you might kill a whole unit, I'll just regrow it with the stratagem. If you put too little into it, maybe I won't use the stratagem right away. Then all the rest of your shooting is wasted, and I'll regrow on my turn and take the objective anyway. Yep. So that's a huge part about playing Necrons and why I put this combo first. This is the one you should include. I saw a comment on the wall that I think someone thinks Ghost Arcs are just better. It's not that one is particularly better. It's that you can play this with any strategy. You can play just some Res Orbs or Reanimator and your stratagem that you get with any list that you're playing. So yes, you could take a Ghost Arc and it makes things very difficult. On top of that, it adds another layer to it, specifically if you're playing Warriors. Moving on a little bit, because I don't want to get too bogged down. The Silent King builds Canoptic Spider. And you go, hey, what's a Canoptic Spider? What does that even do? Okay, Canoptic Spider basically turns the Silent King into a mini knight. He's there mostly just to give a 6-up Feel No Pain to the Silent King. And when you consider that he can regrow Menhirs, now it's starting to be a real problem, because you put a certain amount of damage into him, he's got his invuln, and then suddenly that Feel No Pain completely changes the math. In addition, the spider actually has some okay shooting. It's got some dev wound blast attacks. Not amazing, but it's something there to consider for 75 points, and this is a combo you'll see in some of the lists later on. 3 Hexmark Destroyers. This is something that I talked about in the Bay chat, the DOG Bay chat. Early on, I went through every index, and as I was going through it one day, I just took an entire day and did it, and I just basically spammed the chat with everything I saw. And one of them was just putting 3 Hexmark Destroyers around a unit that you expect your opponent to shoot. The Hexmark Destroyers get blown up, and then they just shoot back. And there's not a limit there. So if somebody happens to walk in range, I don't know, of a short distance, like on certain GW maps, I believe it's like layout 4 with the big open spot in the middle, it's really hard not to be within 18 and still get line of sight on something in the middle. And if you just have some little Hexmark Destroyers sitting there, they're just all shooting back at you every time. The value they give can add up and that's why they're here. You don't have to play this way, but it is something that is very powerful that you can do into certain metagames. Then we have the Technomancer and the Sovereign Coronal. You can replace the Technomancer with a Technomancer Destroyer if you don't have a Technomancer. I don't know why you're playing Necrons. You don't have a Technomancer, but you could. The Technomancer is just the cheapest.
Why?
Yeah, this is like just go buy one. But in the case that you just love Hexmark Destroyers and you hate the Technomancer model for some reason, you could. The Sovereign Coronal, what it does is it counts your Necrons within an aura as being led. In this case, it lets you get +1 to hit, but it also turns on some of your cool stratagems. Most importantly, I think the best combo with this is 1 CP lets your shooting unit reroll all wounds. That's just a great stratagem. That's a good rate. We would have killed for that in several armies last edition. Most armies would kill for that right now, and Necrons just get it. You get the Technomancer because he's lone op. You get the Hexmark is lone op.
Let's talk about the fact that the Technomancer also gives you some Cryptothralls. That makes me happy.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of value you can have just with this combo. Then we have something that, of course, everyone knows about. I almost didn't want to put it on here because everyone knows about it. For some reason, they let the Transcendent Catan have the Sempiternal Weave. That gives him a 4 Feel No Pain.
Feel No Pain. Also, he can now heal.
Yeah, and that's just kind of like, it's a no-brainer. This is just a very, very tough unit. And surprisingly, he can run around and do actions because he can just teleport. That's something that's missed out on a lot, is you think of him as this big, tough thing that you go like, well, I'm just not going to shoot him. And he goes, cool. He scores you the primary, and then he teleports off into, Nowheresville to score points, and then teleports back later. A very good unit, if a little bit expensive now.
True, but still unbelievably durable.
Oh, yeah. And that we'll get to, that is definitely, who would have guessed it? Necron's big thing this edition is, how durable are you? And their answer is the most. I am the wall.
I think you meant to say, how durable are you? And the answer is yes.
Yes. That is 100% right. Next one is the Locust Lord plus Locust Destroyers. This is one that I picked out really early on, and obviously you could add the Veil of Darkness in too, so you get this teleporting block of shooting. What the Locust Lord does is he lets your lethal hits go off on 5s for the Locust Destroyers, and Locust Destroyers reroll 1s if they are shooting the closest eligible target. So this unit actually puts a lot of damage into one particular thing. Is it particularly durable? No. Can the Lord have a Res Orb? Yeah. So it's durable in the fact that your opponent really needs to commit to get rid of it, because otherwise you just regrow a bunch of them. And as you'll see, some people are starting to use this now in more lists, but it's something that is definitely probably not on a lot of people's radar. Finally, you have something that is talked about often but isn't taken very often. You have a Chronomancer, the Veil of Darkness, and Immortals. What this lets you do is it lets you shoot and then move. That thing that Eldar just gets to do for free. Well, it turns out you can pay a bunch of points and do it in Necrons if you so desire. Now, it is a powerful ability. That is a reason I think Eldar is really good, is moving out of phase or moving after you shoot. Doing extra movement shenanigans is just good in the game, and this is your way to do it in Necrons, other than reanimating.
It's a big deal on that. So I like these quite a bit, because this is how you get your shenanigans happening. You know what? I want to jump over here. We need to talk about what's in an effective list, because you left off one thing.
Oh, hit me with it.
So you've got, how am I scoring secondaries? Who scores them? Solo Locust Destroyers, Scarabs, Death Marks, my boys Flayed One, 2 jumping in, Tomb Blades, one of the best units in the entire Codex, Index, whatever it is right now. Obviously, when you go to hold objectives, big blocks of warriors or Lychguard with some Cryptothralls and Technomancers and things joined in. But you go, what is this army's identity? Immovable wall, also trash factory scoring machine.
I figured you'd say it. Yeah.
You can have so many, those single destroyers, those units of Flayed Ones just jumping in, Tomb Blades, who also are fantastic at taking out the trash too. That is so many shots that they have, and you can really score. I've seen so many games with Necrons played really well where they're just putting up these giant scores, so it doesn't even matter. It's like you're having a hard time removing them, but you're doing a good job. You're finally killing the Necrons off, and you realize that they've got a 98. And you're just like, oh, well, Well, shit.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good, huh? Yeah.
So, like, that's one of the things that I really think when you're building an effective Necrons list is, man, they have some great trash. And as somebody that's a trash man, this is a fantastic army for taking trash.
100%. And as we move on to that, what are the rulings you need to know about? There are two in particular, and I actually have a whole slide dedicated to one of them. The first one is, can I just put one solo character in a Ghost Arc? For me, this raises the Ghost Arc's playability to yes, I want that. If you can bring just one Technomancer, I don't know, with the Sovereign Coronal, and just throw him in a Ghost Arc and not have that Ghost Arc explode immediately, that's good. Take that. If your TO has decided you can't, and it requires 10 guys plus a character, or some combination between, maybe consider not taking it. I don't think a 10-man warrior brick is really going to do very much for you. Then, Brad, if you'll hit the next slide.
I'm already
on
there. Okay. I look into the future, my friend.
Yeah, he is the Farseer. This is Brad the Farseer. So you need to know this. This is something I double-checked. I always double-check if I think something works some way or doesn't. I even go to Pedro Reyes, who's a TO currently in part of the GW Judge program and working towards it. You need to know this, because this is something that I know some people can mess up. And you do not have to read this whole blurb. I will give you the rundown. The rundown is, let's say your Necron unit takes some casualties from a shooting attack, and they kill all but one guy. Okay, sounds good, right? You get to reanimate. If you try to reanimate too much, you can only place the guys back that would end in coherency with that first guy. Okay, so you need to know how the ruling is going to work if they are ruling it that way. What does that mean? What does all this gobbledygook I'm saying mean? It means it doesn't matter how many guys you can reanimate back in one go if they can't fit in coherency. This is a huge thing if your TO is going to rule ahead of time that, I don't care that your 20 Necrons started 20 strong at the beginning of the phase. Actually, the only thing that matters now is you only have one guy left and you must place in coherency with them.
And it's a big deal on this, get to remember that. But we got to remember to say that it is one go. So if you res guys, multiple times, each time that's when you check. So if there's one guy and then there's now four guys, when you res, let's say in the command phase, after you res some other guys, then those four guys are now considered the original squad.
And we don't want you to get too bogged down in this. It is something you need to take to your TO, make sure you understand it fully, because most of the time it's not going to matter. You're going to res from several different sources. Sometimes it will be absolutely crucial to you winning or losing a game. That is the only reason I'm bringing it up here, because this is the first time in doing these where this is actually something where if you don't know it, you'll be playing it wrong. And this is one that I think some people would get wrong, and somebody go, oh, well, you're just cheating. No, you're not cheating. You just made a mistake. There's some complex rule interaction here, and it's not very clear. So I just wanted to throw it out here. This is something you do need to know playing with or against Necrons.
100%. Let's talk about some strengths and weaknesses. As usual, good dad will talk about the strengths. Defense, reanimations, feel no pains, tons of bodies, tons of trash. Because you've got so much versatile trash with multiple scoring options. You should be putting up big numbers with this. Even in games where you're getting your head rolled, you should put up a decent amount of points. That's one of the best things about Necrons is you can play really well. You have a chance of victory even in games where you're getting bodied. Easy to play, but it's got a high skill ceiling. I love it. These objectives are mine, and I'm using my entire army to make it stay that way. You can also, one of the biggest strengths about Necrons is you can lure people into doing things they shouldn't be doing. Focusing heavily on your warrior unit, your Lychguard unit. And even if they're successful, they've usually dedicated too many resources to picking that up in the first place. And then all of your trash is scoring 1,000,000 points. You're move blocking, you're scoring, you're setting up for the next turns. So you can make people just play, as usual, just non-optimally. And you can do that so well with Crons.
Yeah, and we'll kind of get to more of that in the practice, as Brad and I love to hit later points because we're just so excited to talk about what we're doing. I played a test game with Jeremy Stan where I just wanted to take a Necron list that wasn't as durable just so I could practice, how reanimations are going to go and see what the score is. He tabled me with Tau, and I still got like a 75. Like, this is the kind of thing you should be doing often with Necrons, is even if your list isn't optimal, even if you're in a bad matchup, you should still be scoring pretty well, almost no matter what. And that is definitely a huge strength that they have. And of course, now it is Bad Dad's time to talk. That is me. We're getting into the weaknesses. The first one is very obvious to anyone who's played against Necrons, is the mobility. Womp womp. They said 5 inches was enough. Sometimes 5 inches is not enough. So that means a lot of times you need to depend on your deployment to fix things. And sometimes you don't have any options for deployment. You just need to be able to put your guys where they need to go. And if your opponent gets first turn and has enough firepower, you might be in a rough spot where you're trying to roll some dice to play the game effectively. You couple that with weak damage output. So the big Lychguard brick that people were scared of, and probably should still be a little scared of, it is a fine amount of attacks, but low strength, middling AP, 1 damage. Not great. Necron Warriors, usually they can choose between short range, low AP, or medium range, no AP. Not a great combination for offensive output, especially if the unit that you're taking to do the most damage also needs to probably stand on an objective or force your opponent to come deal with them. That's not what you want your damage dealing units to do. Even our best damage dealing units, Doomsday Arc, Gauss Destructor, Locust Heavy Destroyers, flat 6 damage AP4 sounds awesome. And then volume of shots sometimes just goes, you didn't really do that much.
1.
Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind when you're playing Necrons, is you need to focus your damage on what matters. We'll get to that too. Finally, I do think these two go together, predictability and blast. Necron's strength is in durability and lots of bodies, and that comes with a natural weakness to blast. Great blast weapons, excuse me.
You right there, buddy?
Yeah. Great blast weapons are definitely something that this edition has. Even some not so great weapons. The Whirlwind, not particularly great at taking Necron bodies, but when its max shots suddenly turns into 13, rerolling hits and wounds. Oh, okay. Well, now your cheap El Cheapo unit isn't really so El Cheapo for its damage. And that's something you're going to run into at Necrons, is you are now adding layers of durability, and suddenly your opponent gets added layers of offense. And that goes along with predictability. And if you're slow moving, you know you're going to have a lot of bodies, a lot of points invested in one place. Your opponent generally has a good idea of what you're trying to do, which means they can focus on doing something about it, whereas you are just trying to do your game plan.
Let's talk about that plan. Lean into your strengths, capitals, or mitigate weaknesses. As I've said before, you're leaning into your strengths is always so much better than trying to mitigate your weaknesses. Mitigate your weaknesses is on the back burner. Front burners are really making this army be what it is. Learn your army's identity, play into that very, very strong. Take the board, be everywhere, be a trash panda. It is so big on this, to make sure that you know what your army does. Your army is a very durable army. Your army can be all over the place with trash things. Do that. You are not the best damage dealing army. Lean into the strengths of being all over and being resilient. Because if you try to lean into the damage, there's just other armies that just do it better. You know what I mean? Again, you can always play rule of cool, always applies. You know what I mean?
Always.
So play what you want, but when you're looking for the most efficient things, I look to be maximum efficiency with what an army can do. And the strengths of Necrons for me are resiliency in those big units, being super hard to deal with, and then just having just an insane amount of trash. Your Death March, your single destroyers, all that can be all over the place. I mean, you just have the ability to just bounce all around and just score points. Lean into that so much. Anytime you're trying to focus too much on Necron damage, I feel that you're just not getting the best of value.
That's exactly right. And I do want to throw out for people who are watching, people want us to be more clear about the plan. The plan is to take bricks of units, choose your warriors, your Lychguard, what have you. Dominate the objective by being able to just be so tough standing on it, and use your single locust destroyers, your flayed ones if you want to get area denial and you love flayed ones, your hexmark destroyers deep striking in, score those secondaries. I do think they play a good tactical game because primary is already so good and they have so many cheap scoring units. But if you wanted to do something like cleanse, deploy teleport homers, and just dominate the middle and score secondaries that way, you definitely could. You obviously need to build your list towards that. If you know you don't have good damage, maybe you're fine doing an action every time with your unit and just say, I'm going to score so many points that you can't ever catch up. I think that's going to be the plan, whether you take fixed or tactical. It just depends on what you prefer to do and what your list looks like.
Great, so much. And you've got some key units in here. Give me some of these key units here and why they're key.
Okay, so you got Lords and Overlords. This is where Necrons get a lot of their benefit. Overlords obviously let you use a free strat. Less good nowadays. It's slightly tougher, so people have figured out that if you try to precision out the characters, that's a good way to deal with Necrons. The Overlord's a little bit tougher. The Lord's big benefit is he's cheaper. Cheap's great. He also gives +1 inches of movement. Not bad, considering we're kind of slow. But really, all those strengths and weaknesses of the individual to aside, you want them because they hold res orbs. They hold res orbs, they hold enhancements like Hypermaterial Ablator, Veil of Darkness to teleport around. You just want them as a body to hold things. In a similar vein, you've got the Technomancer, who gives a 5-up Feel No Pain, and Orican, who has a 4-up invuln to the unit. Orican also, surprisingly, does crazy damage 1 turn out of the game. He gets dev wounds and just a ton of attacks. Pretty solid out of a Necron unit you didn't expect, because the little weird guy on a 25 mil base that is, for some reason, twice as tall as everybody else just bops a unit.
I was just about to say that. I'm like, even though he's in the smallest base, he's also popping up over everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a silly little thing. And as Brad and I have mentioned several times, the Solo Locust Destroyer. You can take these in 2-mans, but 1-man does the job just fine. And if you think, well, this one guy doesn't really do all that much, he's only 30 points. You can just drop him off to a side and prevent somebody coming in. In the same practice game I was playing with Jeremy when I was just testing out, we call it limit testing. See what Necrons could do, try to test the rules. I'm just using Solo Destroyers to stop those giant bricks of Crisis from coming in. I'm just saying, here's this guy. You can shoot him. I don't care. He's 30 points. You're not coming where you want to go. That maybe doesn't sound that awesome, but when you have 3 of them and you can do that all the time.
Move blocking's a hell of a thing. Plus they score actions, move block, get in the way. It's awesome when your 30-point guy stopped 360 points plus a character from shooting you with 54 CIBs.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to that. Is making those plays as Necrons is key, because you're realistically probably not killing that big unit. So you got to deal with it in other ways.
Let's talk about the Reanimator and why he's so key.
Oh, man. Okay, so one thing about the Reanimator is yes, as we said at the beginning, he adds an extra D3 to whenever you're reanimating. But more importantly, he's OZ3 and has a 4-up Feel No Pain. So when you get to the later stages of the game and they've expended their whole army to deal with your Necron blob, you just walk this guy out and suddenly he tanks everything. You thought the Crypto Thralls were bad. This guy's higher toughness and he still has the 4-up Feel No Pain. Just a key unit that you hold on to until later in the game where you can really maximize him.
Locust Heavy Destroyers might be my favorite thing, because you have great options on them too. Between the trash killing gun or the big dog gun, you have an argument for both, and they're good for the cost. So good.
Yeah, and this is something you can try to lean into it. You can lean into the anti-tank in 3-mans, or if you just, you love how the single Locust Destroyers play, you can just play solo Heavy Destroyers if you want. You give them the anti-infantry option, and that one guy is putting out 12 attacks with exploding 6s. That's pretty good for one guy you just want to screen out Crisis Suits dropping on you, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's good strength on it. It's just a legit unit, whether it's singles or triples. I one of my favorites in the Necron book. So let's talk about that Scarab and Tomb Blade. I can't go. Tomb Blades go in every Necron for me. They are so fantastic. fast moving, crap tons of shots. They can block out really well. They've got multiple purposes on this. They take out the trash so well, and they just score you points.
Yeah, anti-trash trash is great, especially when your anti-trash trash can, for 1 CP, the loadout we're talking about is with particle beamers. It's just a bazillion shots. And for 1 CP, they just get assault. So whenever you need to go kill trash, you can. Whenever you need to go score an objective or a secondary, you can. And that versatility for that amount of points, for that much movement, just a great all-around unit.
Oh, it's fantastic. They kick it. Also, it makes me happy because I get to roll a billion dice. Let's talk about how we're practicing this, brother. Let's practice.
Yeah. So we harp on this every time. You've heard it before. I'm going to say it again. Please talk with your opponent. It doesn't matter if you're playing at the store, if you're playing in a tournament, wherever you are playing a game, talk with your opponent and communicate on what you're trying to do. More important in a practice game when you're trying to figure out, hey, what's the best thing for me to be doing? Well, your opponent, just like you should do for them, should try to help you. 100%. Hey, if you do this, I'm going to do this. So you probably shouldn't do that. That is something that should come up very often. And yes, the next thing I always hear is, well, but, I want to play it as if we're playing in a tournament. Okay, the problem with that, and what I constantly say is, you don't have enough time to play a 3-hour game all the way to its conclusion, playing it just like you would in a tournament, and still get as much as you need to out of that game. Warhammer games take probably 3 hours to play, just to roll the dice and move the models, to think and plan. And we, as normal people, do not have time for that. You do not have time to get through all the variations. So being time efficient is something that is very important, and talking will help you be time efficient to get the most out of your practice sessions.
And the biggest thing about that is that you can do both, but you have to have some practice where you're talking through, or you're not going to get enough games, quote, id, because you're not going to have, again, like Sean was saying, you just don't have enough time to play that many games. So you can get multiple games in, you can talk through multiple permutations. Also, you can get that feedback from your opponent. Hey, if I do this, what are you going to do? And that lets you, understand other armies better, because your opponent starts explaining, well, this is how I would deal with that, or this is tougher to deal with it. You can make this harder for me by doing this. And then you kind of learn how that other army plays, so you are just better at it when you get to that tournament. Exactly,
because, there's also the, are you going to run into every army? If maybe, this happened actually with me with when Drukhari was a big threat. I didn't have anybody to play Drukhari with. I didn't have a single person. So it's really important when you find that one person who says, I love Drukhari, to say, cool, please tell me everything about it. Please help me with this, because you are
you are my only hope.
Only hope. Yeah, as I'm letting us go there. Star Wars goes everywhere,
So let's talk about practice in this Necrons, because one of my biggest things is the first thing we have up here is move forward, don't just sit still. Because if you get trapped in the corner, it doesn't really matter what happens for the rest of the game. If you're trapped in the corner, you're not scoring. So even if they're not killing you and you are starting to kill them, if you're in the corner, you're not going to win the game. You're not scoring your secondaries. You're not taking those primaries. So it's important to don't get trapped. Don't put baby in the corner.
And also what we mean by this is, since you have generally low damage output, if your opponent spreads out, you're going to have to make a choice between staying in your little box or trying to actually score points. And you never want to be in that position as Necrons. You never want to have to choose between scoring or not scoring. This is more importantly an army that should always be scoring. You should be dominating the primary, and then that should be so, got that locked down, that you should be focusing on denying your opponent's secondaries and scoring your own.
And again, be very mindful of the score, always, in practice and in your games, tournaments, and everything. You have to know what you have, what your opponent has, so that you know, is this game even in my head? How do I have to play? Do I need to push for it even more? Or do I need to do absolutely nothing? My favorite plan. Do absolutely nothing and just win the game. Because there's a lot of times, and I can't stress this enough, know your mission. You're playing so much differently on missions like Purge the Foe and Priority Targets than you're playing if you're just playing a Take and Hold. Because there's so many reasons to do absolutely nothing in those 2 missions. So don't lose models, don't give engagements, don't roll, you give your opponent chances to roll dice when there's no gain, points to be gained by doing that.
Yeah, and that leads us into I'm going to skip the second one and hit the third one. You should always make it your opponent. It should always cost them something to respond to you. You are definitely the army as Necrons that you need to practice putting your opponent in a weird position where they're like, ooh, I could kill this or I could kill this. And then it's really on them to make the right decision. And if they make the wrong decision, you're still just standing there scoring 15s on primary. So moving forward and not just sitting still, and then making it cost your opponent to deal with these things that are slowly trudging at them, and just making life annoying for them, is really going to pay dividends in your tournament games after you've practiced this a few times.
100% on that. And one of the biggest things, always, 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 don't forget to talk about what isn't working for you and your opponent. Figure out who's the MVP and who's on the chopping block when your units. And and when in your play, what are the things that I could have done differently? And we try to address those right away and figure those out. Sometimes even jot a note down. You know what I mean? I can't do this against this kind of unit. I can't push up forward units on this because they have too many fast things that'll get to me and I'm giving their free movement. I can't not put forward deploying things up against this unit because I need to move block them early on. So you learn from these practices, especially big things of, hey, if I let this happen early, the game's kind of over. I got blocked in. Can I stop that? Could I put somebody up? Could I scout over here? Could I forward over here?
Yeah, and that's I'll hit the last bullet point for us, and we can move on, is knowing when to split up versus huddling up. This is a huge deal with Necrons because you don't have a bunch of movement in your primary scoring units. Sometimes your opponent just does not have enough damage to deal with a big block of guys. In that case, of course you split up. And you, when you're practicing, ask your opponent, hey, do you think you can actually deal with this? And if the answer is no, practice splitting your forces up. If the answer is yes, like against, for example, Tau, you definitely want to huddle up and say, no, really, we're going to fight over the middle. And you just make it so if part of their army detaches off to try to fight you, you just make it irrelevant because they can't ever split their force up and take out everything. That's a huge deal and one of the big reasons. And for example, I know I keep referencing the practice game because it's the most recent one I did. There is no way Jeremy could kill everything. He just could not grind back enough damage, even as Tau, because I was just making sure my guys were where they were supposed to be and they stayed there. And then, I just blocked out his movement with reinforcements coming in.
I want to go to the wall real quick because Austin has a great point. He goes, breakdown of turn-based mental math would be good at some point. Like, how many VPs do you consider given for your army and your plan? And what turns do you mentally isolate as pivots for the game? That's a great thing. And we'll go into that more in depth in one of our next ones, to be honest. But as a quick fix for that, it's a big deal. I hate to give the politician answer, but it really depends on the mission. Because it's going to be a wildly different answer for Priority and Purge than it is going to be for a lot of the others. And it's also going to be big on whether my opponent chose fixed or tactical, and can he spike on tactical? Because tactical can spike sometimes. They take your objective and something else. They can score a 13, plus the mission itself. So all of a sudden they can get anywhere between a 25 and a 28 point turn. So it's going to be a little bit different on the math on that. Can I just keep my opponent somewhere else? And that's a lot of times where I say I want to play 10th edition kind of the same way as 9th edition, in the fact that I want to be even or ahead the entire game because it makes my opponent have to do things as opposed to me having to do things and then he can counter. Super easy to counter, especially if you have to go to your opponent because they get to use 100% of their forces against whatever you sent to them.
And that's a big part of it. And I'm glad you bring that up, Austin. There is something that a lot of 40K content producers don't talk about, which is there are so many variables in this game that it is very difficult to condense it all down into into something like easily digestible. As I've mentioned before in other deal with it, there's like 20 missions. Combine that with 26 armies. with the option to take fixed or to take tactical, and just the sheer amount of units along every army, there's just almost we talk about how many combinations of hands you can draw in a deck of 52 cards. Well, that we're just taking that to extremes in this case, where it's like multiple decks of cards with multiple different games, like if we're playing poker or if we're playing Uno or whatever. There's so many combinations that
Poker to Uno.
it literally is like that. I mean, you take normal advice you'd give to somebody, and then they play against knights, and you're like, yeah, take whatever I said, just throw it out the window. We have a completely different plan now.
Move block for the win.
Exactly, and that's something that you can go to kind of these fallbacks. We call them heuristics. Hey, if I'm playing against a knight's army, I want to move block him. That's something that Brad and I know instinctively. And you go, well, they can just move over you. Well, kind of, but knights have one big problem, which is they have massive bases.
I was say, yeah, they can move over me, except for you got to get that big fat butt all the way over and an inch away. So,
but just in closing on that thought, if you would like to see more, like as Austin said, hey, how do I calculate my mental math to know what to do? Just let us know. Let us know in the comments. We can absolutely do a deal with it on just breaking down how to think about the scoring in the game. We can break down specifically, hey, how do I actually know what I'm taking? Do I take tactical or fixed here? And we absolutely can break that down for a few different scenarios if that would help people.
Let's talk about the actual making of adjustments. And to be honest with you, I'm going to make this super weird because I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to immediately go to the bottom. So, one, we're going to say it every single time. Don't force yourself into the list that just won whatever. Don't let somebody talk you out of certain units too. It's very important to play your style, especially, and also again, the rule of cool still applies. But I want to go all the way to the bottom with that because a lot of people go, I just wasn't in great position. And this is why I think that the turn-by-turn practice and going back and resetting is such a big deal. A lot of games are lost or won in deployment. You have to. Deployment, I call it turn 0 and turn 1. Determines almost the entire game. Because if you were out of position, especially if you were out of position with a not fast-moving army like Necrons, you were going to have problems the entire game. And you want to practice where is the most optimum way for me to do that. And you have to start setting up. If you set your army up, even if you're by yourself on this. For instance, I use TTS like a million times more for deployment than I do games. I just keep deploying my army and go, okay, if I'm here, I can get to here. Okay, let's start looking at the angles my opponent can shoot me at. Let's look at how far away I am from the objectives. Where am I going? That's the thing is when you deploy, don't just deploy so you can't be shot. Deploy so that you have things you can do in the next turns. Where am I going? And that doesn't mean just deploying in the open. That's why it's such a thing to practice. It's very difficult on that, is getting great deployment because you have to make sure that you have scoring options, denial options, continuing on. And it's such a big deal when you're talking about a unit like a Lychguard unit that's moving at the speed of smell. You have to put them in a good place and you have to make your initial movement perfect. You have to make it really good where you want to be. That will determine what they're doing for the rest of the game. Because sometimes if you deploy incorrectly and you slightly mess up your movement on turn 1, it feels like that unit's just wandering around for the rest of the game. Especially if your opponent gets into very, very hard move blocks and stuff. If I'm playing Tyranids, for instance, and I see Sean has put his Lychguard in a poor place, I'll take 10 gargoyles. And just surround the unit and go, well, cool. Enjoy being here for the rest of the game. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be able to recover from a bad deployment, a bad movement, and a move block. It's just that's just over. So it's really, really important to practice that deployment. If you can't deploy just anything else, practice your deployment more than anything, and it will give you the most value. What's up, Carmona?
Yeah, this ends up being I'm going to dip in the little Colonel Defense Investigator pocket here. Oftentimes I ask people, what do you want out of this? And that's what you should be doing when you're making adjustments. If you are just hitting this checklist of, am I durable? Do I have scoring units? Do I have counter threats to threats? You're going to have a fine army. It's going to work out fine, but you need to make sure you know what you want to be doing. If you set up on the board and you realize, oh, I actually have no idea what I want to be doing, take a second. Before you ever get to the table, figure out what you want to be doing. A lot of times, as Brad hit on, we talk about you can set up, even when you don't have an opponent, just throw the mission out, throw some terrain on the board, set up how you would actually set up. Now that works at level, the first level of thinking, okay, I do this. And then suddenly your opponent throws you through a curveball and you go, oh, this doesn't work at all. When you can fall back on, what do I want to be doing? You'll know the answer to if your knight's opponent deploys everything on the line. You'll know the answer to suddenly your Eldar opponent, you brought all indirect and your Eldar opponent just puts everything in reserve. You're just like, some people just blue screen. They're just like, oh, I have no idea what to do now. Because they didn't really know what they wanted to be doing in the game. They just had specifically, well, I'm doing this. So focus on what you want to be doing rather than just doing things.
One of the other things with this deployment, know the size of your army, and that's why practice and deployment's a big deal too. There's going to be tons of time when you'll deploy your army, and if you haven't deployed it before, and you all of a sudden get on the table and go, oh crap, I can't hide this. I don't have enough space. This army's too fast. It'll get angles on me. You have to know that before, because before you started deploying, there was a step called putting things in reserve. So you need to know how big your butt is. How much do I stick out? What things have to go in reserve just because I'm playing an Eldar, a Tau, tank heavy guard, whatever. You know what I mean? Depending on the mission and the terrain that you're playing on, you might just not be able to fit certain things on the board without getting killed. So you need to go, what has to go on the board? Cool. How much space do they take up? Great. Look at that first. There's times when I go up and I've deployed my army so much I know exactly what's going to happen. But if you haven't had enough time for that, you're going to a tournament, put your army on the board before the mission starts, before anything else, and look at, okay, well, does this fit? And then So it's just important to have placed your army at some point in time on the terrain you're going to be playing on.
That's right. And if you take away nothing else from this, how big is your butt is a 40K term, and we are keeping it that way. All right, just moving on. If you're struggling against Necrons, this is one I see often, and how I beat up on Necrons is, they come, they stand there, and they just lose. Your goal is, yes, to control the objectives, but you do not want to be fighting on them. You do not want to fight on the objectives. You want to fight away from the objectives, so that when you expend your army, they never actually made it to the objectives. That's actually how you score primary. This is actually very true for a lot of armies. And something that I did initially on Dice with Rice is try to explain, hey, on this mission, you try to fight here. And if you look at where you try to control, it's away from where you try to control every time. A very classic strategy, and one you can really learn as Necrons, is screen out your backfield, push the fight away from you. It's almost going to be universal in whatever army you play, aside from Genestealer cults, which have no rules. He's the one guy screaming, there's no rules. And somebody's like, there's what? And he's like, no, there are no rules. I do it. I play the game completely differently. And that's fine. For Necrons, push the fight away from you. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about don't just stand there. Move forward. Get them away from you. If they kill all my guys, awesome. You didn't do it on the objectives, and I still scored all my points. We're done here. I get a 98.
Love everything about that. The thing we talked about, you even talked about it earlier, then I'm going to move on to the next slide because, as usual, I'm talking too much and we're taking forever. So, if they kill a big unit of yours in one activation, what did it cost them? Were all the rest of it, is all the things you have on the table alive except for that one thing because they had to use all their shit to kill it? Cool. I'm still scoring a bunch of points. So I'm okay with that. Run me through some deal with it on the 5 steps, Mr. Sean.
All right. I'll hit it with us, and then we can see everybody's favorite part, those juicy, juicy lists. We have 4 today because somebody complained about not having enough lists. I have answered you. But first, so how have we dealt with it? In preparation, you know what your combos are. You know what you're looking to do and how you're scoring. You know what terrain your event's using. We said this last time, and I'll say it again. Player place terrain is always more favorable. 99% of the time, it's more favorable to shooting armies. And we know how they're going to rule reanimations, and if we can just have our Ghost Arc live with one single Technomancer or Hexmark Destroyer, what have you, just sitting in it. It's a huge deal for Necrons, depending on if Warriors are stronger or if Lychguard are stronger. Then
Yes.
we identified, what is strong and what's weak. We know we're slow. We know we have low damage output. We're going to make it not matter. We're just going to bring so much trash to the table, so many bodies, that we're just going to score primary, and then we're going to play the game figuring out how to deny them secondaries while just scoring our own. Then we've made a plan. We know we're going to take those objectives. We are coming in knowing that those objectives, those are ours. Those are our objectives. We're going to make our plan to stop our opponent from taking them back. That involves moving forward, not just standing there. You don't want to be standing and fighting on your own objectives. That is a losing proposition in 40k. Yes, we are a stat check army. If you did not bring enough guns to take care of my my Necrons, I will eventually just swarm you. And I may not kill you, but I don't need to. And that's part of the plan.
And a big deal with that is you can't stop your opponent from getting shots on you, but you can mitigate them from getting all of their shots on you. Using your other units to move block are such a big thing on that. Because a lot of times when you're looking at killing a Lychguard unit, if they're not able to focus everything on it, they won't pick it up. So sometimes just cutting those angles off for a couple of their units. You can't stop everybody from getting there, but you can stop a lot of them from getting there. And that one or two extra units are now the reason that one or two guys survived, and all of a sudden you're still on the objective, and you rezzed, and then you rezzed again. And maybe they don't have the ability to get there again because you tucked a little bit better in, you move blocked again. So it's a big deal. The small things add up throughout a 40k game.
100%. And, Brad's in on it. You have to practice. We know how we're deploying. If you're playing Necrons, step one, you got to know how you're deploying. Broken armies, fast armies, usually they can fix it a little bit. Tyranids, you can just redeploy sometimes if you're playing Vanguard. You're going to practice up moving with your army to where you want to be, and then moving past it to deny your opponent where they want to be. I keep mentioning it because it's extremely critical to playing this army. And every time you practice, make sure you're communicating with your opponent on what is the best thing to do. You're making the most of the small time you have to play 40k. And finally, please practice making it cost your opponent to do something. Especially with slow armies, as we said, if you are not making it cost your opponent something, be that position on the table, be that maybe some trash units, maybe that's overcommitting some of their more powerful pieces, make sure it's costing your opponent to do something. Because in any 40k game where your opponent just gets to do whatever they want, you're probably going to lose.
Let's talk about the making adjustments. Now, it's one of my biggest things on this is you can't make huge adjustments all the time. Solve for X, not X through Z. It's important that you've got a core concept of what your army does, and you're pulling things in and out. You're going to be making adjustments all the time. We're getting new codices all the time. We're going to probably get a new season of missions eventually here. You're going to be constantly adjusting, but you have to adjust small, a few hundred points. You can't be adjusting the whole list all the time because you're always solving for everything then. And you have to focus, what is the core concept of my list? Then let's optimize that core concept. That's how you make adjustments, and that's how you get into being a better player and making a better army list for yourself.
100%.
You want to talk about some lists?
Oh yeah.
It's Lychguard.
Surprise! It's almost like they were the big bads, and I still think they are. I still think they're actually a solid competitive option to bring. You don't have to play Warriors if you don't want to. Sometimes I know looking at a Necron army, you get it all painted together, and you're like, awesome. And then somebody's like, all right, we're playing Warriors now. And you go, not awesome. I don't have any painted. And then your life is miserable for the next, 6 weeks as you paint 60 Necron Warriors and whatever else goes along with them. So if you don't like that, it's Lychguard.
Yep. And the thing about this is, it also goes with 1+ Saves ask is, how do you feel about Doomsday Arcs? And I go, Sean likes them all significantly more than I do. I just want more trash as usual, because that's the way I play. But they're really good still, because they put out a decent amount of damage. And they do have long range guns. Now, the big thing about this list is Catacomb command barge, giving out that all over the place, sneaking all over, giving that 6-inch. You've got lords, you've got technomancers going with crypto thralls into the double Lychguard and just being durable with sword and board, trying to be those annoying things sitting on objectives. You've got your heavy destroyers, you've got your single locust heavy destroyers just stealing objectives. You've got your auto take reanimator. If you take a Necron army, it just populates a reanimator inside there. And then you've got some Tomb Blades rocking out. What would Brad like? No Doomsday Arcs, so many more Tomb Blades and destroyers.
Which you'll see. There is a variety of ways to play Necrons.
So many ways,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
This is standard. This is just a strong deal, though. This is a really big anvil of a list. It's very hard to move, and it has other utility options inside of it.
Yeah, and as we talk about personal play styles, that's a big thing, and why we were talking about, Brad sees something that costs 175 points and just kills something, and he's like, this could be 3 more units that just walk and stand in front of my opponent.
Yep.
That's just what he does. I, think of it more a little differently. I look at it as, okay, if I was going to play against this army, what would I be worried about? Well, if they can't shoot me back, I'm just going to disrespect them. It's like playing against World Eaters. You just go stand in front of them, or Death Guard. You just go stand in front of them and shoot them until they aren't there anymore. I think that is something you can mitigate by playing, some Locust Heavy Destroyers in big bricks. You can play the Locust Destroyer plus the normal Locust Destroyer Lord, or you can play some Doomsday Arcs, because sure, you're going to roll 2 shots sometimes, miss one and wound once, and then you're going to save on a 4-up. Or you're going to roll max shots and just delete the unit. And adding that element to the list of, ooh, do I really want to step out? That thing could kill me. Do I win or do I lose if it kills me? Do I get anything from that? Meanwhile, you get the mental freedom in your list to be like, you have to deal with that. I don't. And then you just push your guys forward. And so you're just adding another layer of things for your opponent to think about.
That's so annoying. They try to kill Lychguard.
Exactly.
I'm going to go to the second one because I love I can't believe it's not Lychguard. And you have my favorite model in all of Necrons. No, it's not a big old giant thing or a vault. Xeris is awesome.
Yeah.
Plus, he's got some awesome fluff. He's got cool stories. And you have Orc and the Diviner, who also has one of the best novels in all of 40K. So it is really nice. You got Xeris, you've got the double Lords, you got Oricon, you got the double Technomancers, of course, double Crypto Thralls. Got 2 units of 20. You've got that double Death Mark, which makes me so happy. We got some Scarabs, the triple Destroyers, the 3-man unit of Locust Heavy Destroyers, a Reanimator, 1 Doomsday Arc, and a Ghost Arc to do shenanigans.
Yeah, this is leaning so heavy into Warriors. You can totally do this, and as Brad said, you can pitch the Doomsday Arc to the wind if you would rather play Tomb Blades and just stand in front of your opponent and go, neener, 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 you can't go anywhere. Totally can do that if you want. This army is focused on scoring, 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 and it asks exactly one question, which is, can you kill all these warriors? And if the answer is no, you probably win. Just perfectly honest.
Is it wrong that I immediately said, what did the fox say? But I am a child. Catan! Mark! 11th in London in the GT. Doing really well. Rocking out with the Necrons. And he brought... I love this list, by the way. Like, a lot.
It is so sweet. I love it. I love
Crombleholme's list anyways, though. I think he's got a very unique way of playing a lot of things. He's on my vibe. He's got this Transcendent Catan doing shenanigans, being very hard to kill. Locust Lord, a Technomancer, 10 Flayed Ones, which I love. 2 units of 5 Death Marks, which is just my go-to. I love them. 2 Crypto Thralls. He's going in that unit of Lychguard with the Technomancer and stuff. 2 single Locust Destroyers, a 6-man Locust Destroyer, the 10 Lychguard, which dumps a bunch of characters and stuff in, and the Crypto Thralls in it. 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers, all 2 units of 3 Ophidian Destroyers, which are actually surprisingly fast, by the way.
Yeah.
And 2 6-man units of Tomb Blades, which again put down like just a stupid amount of volume of fire. And they're really fast for what they do on that. Just you pick off stuff on flanks and you just roll a million dice. They also are move blocking aficionados, you run up 6 Tomb Blades, and it is so annoying. It just takes up so much space.
So you can see kind of, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about this one a little bit more, because obviously this is something that can compete. If you're like, oh, how do Necrons compete? You can do this. And if you look at the units he's taking, sure, he's got the Lychguard, but he's also doing very different things than you would see normally. And this is obviously someone who has played a lot of Necrons, decided exactly how they want to play it. I'm sure getting 11th at the London GT is, it's not nothing. That's pretty good.
He's playing it at full Brad style too. He wants to be everywhere. I love this list because of that. He just has stuff he's putting everywhere. He's move blocking. He's picking off flanks. He's using volume of shots. He's not trying to he doesn't have a ton of power. He's leading into the fact that he can just be durable and have trash everywhere.
Yeah, and so what are the standouts here? Transcendent Catan, we already said, it's a very tough piece that also can go and score secondaries. So double usage there. He's got the Locust Lord plus the Locust Destroyers. I said it before. He's got the Veil of Darkness. So it gives him two options. The first is, yes, he can collapse the flank by teleporting over. The second option is to hold them back. And then his opponent has to play around it the entire game. Until suddenly, if he realizes, oh, it doesn't matter if they play around it. He just throws them out there and they move block and take something out. It's pulling, a lot of things in this list are pulling double duty, and that's why I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Another unique thing is 10 Flayed Ones. World Eaters can be a concern for you. You know what World Eaters don't like? 10 Flayed Ones just stringing out with Infiltrate in front of your opponent. Suddenly, you are not getting to me before I get to the objective. You must kill these guys.
It's such a dumpster for so many units. Things like World Eaters, any army that's very vehicle heavy. This is a trash fire to play if you're playing like Orcs, for instance, because I'll be playing him this weekend. He can just put roadblocks after roadblock in front of you, and you're like, I'm super annoyed at killing your trash. I'd really like to play the game, and you're like, we'll talk to you about turn 4 about that. So it's a big deal. I love everything about this. And let's go to the Gavin, Silent King, Gavin Conn, 12th Crucible. Bringing out the Silent King. I'm going to let you rock this one down.
All right, yeah. I figured he's like, Silent King, that's too many points. I'm afraid of that. Keep
like,
that out of me.
My heart.
He gets scared here. People love the Silent King. I love the Silent King. My Silent King is custom, and instead of being on his throne, he is on a giant pillar of rock with his guys hanging out. I love it. I love the Silent King. There is a real reason to bring him. As you see, this is, I think it was an 87-person tournament with a bunch of Team USA players, high-ranked players. Gavin played an exceptionally good game. If you were hanging out playing tournaments, I probably have looked at your list. I am just a BCP troll. I just go and look at everything because I want to know what cool things people are into. Gavin played a bunch of very close games. I believe he went 4-2, so throwing that out there first. His 2 losses were to phenomenal players, and they were very close losses. In one case, it was just a very close game. In the other case, I believe one thing went wrong, and then that snowballed from there. With that out of the way, the Silent King, what does he do? First, he can be an aura of reroll 1s to hit and wound. Pretty great when you don't have a whole lot of rerolls in your Necrons. Second, if you are someone who is tired of Night Spinners and tired of them shooting your Necrons, the Silent King has the option to ignore them. You don't ignore the can advance, but you do ignore the -2 movement, which can be huge.
Your Lychguard, thank him so much for that.
Right, and that is...
I'm now moving 3?
Yeah, and as I talked about earlier, he does have the Silent King plus the Canoptic Spider, so basically the Silent King's just this little knight that regrows a bunch of wounds, and that is so annoying to deal with sometimes, especially when your trash is getting picked off by his indirect shots now. Because, yeah, the Silent King has indirect attacks now. Then we got 2 Lords. Again, you just take Lords. They're going to go with the 2 Lychguard bricks. Same with Orkin and the Technomancer. You got the Reanimator that, as I said, if you're taking more than 1 Lychguard brick, you're taking Warriors, it just goes into your list. He's got the Trash. He's got the 2 Locust Destroyers. He's got the 2 Scarab units. He has 2-man Locust Heavy Destroyers. I think that's an interesting choice. That's like kind of leaning into the MSU style of it, but also... could just be 1-mans, and then he could get more units in there, and maybe they would do the same thing. Don't know. Haven't played 2-man Locust Heavy Destroyers before. Probably need to play it and find out. And then he's got Tomb Blades, because Tomb Blades are silly. They do everything you want to do.
This is also a super solid list. Love it. I mean, obviously, I don't like the Silent King, but
Just allergic to it. It's too many points.
it's funny
Get it out of
because
here.
like I actually love all the things he does, but it just hurts me to bring that many points, and that is because I'm allergic to big models on that stuff. But it's this is super solid. It has things to deal with everything, and that's what I love about it. What here's the question for everybody. I want to get this. We should get a Discord going on this. First off, I'm going to put the Death Glory Discord. Always busy, always doing stuff. What would you like to see us do next? We've got a couple planned, but I would love to do deep dives on anything people really want us to see.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a faction. If you just really want to see, like, hey, I've always wondered about this thing. Can you guys just like deep dive on it? Because there are a lot of people that put out 40K content that don't deep dive into this one thing. And maybe you want to see it. We're the deep dive guys. I mean, like, we're really going into it here. There's no paywall. You can just ask your question. We'll give you exactly what you want. We just want to know. So you can leave a comment on the video, or you can join the Death of Glory Discord and just ask and just see, hey, I want to know about this. And I really want to know about it. And we'll give it to you.
I love everything about this. On that, thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon. Check it out. Again, throw in what you're thinking about. All right, Evan's already on it. Deal with it, Admac. But
Ooh.
rock that. But there's tons of stuff we'd love to do. We like hanging out. And until then, Queens Wave. Rock and roll.